Hey everybody, welcome back. This is going to be the 7.24 support tier list video. So we're going to start off just talking about the tier 1 and then go into the tier 2 and the tier 3. I'll probably spend most of my time on these, but there's a few honorable mentions that I get asked about a lot that I'll run through as well, such as Sion, Xerath, Lux. I'll just go through some in detail that I don't talk about a lot on the tier list, but that I constantly get messages about. So I can go ahead and answer some of those as well. And I'm going to try to focus just strictly on the tier list here. I do have another video about the patch notes if you want to check that out. It's very detailed, talks about, you know, everything that changed in this patch. And there were a lot of changes. So I'm only going to reference that loosely whenever I'm talking about the tier list and how it changes. Just every now and then. But I'm not going to rehash all of that. So if you want to see all that, it's a great video. If I do say so myself, so go check it out. It'll give you all the details you want to know about all the changes and every position. I'm also going to have a meta-analysis video probably over the next couple of days where I tell you sort of where I think the meta is going, how it's shifting, and yeah, where I think it'll go next. If you want to access this Google Doc, you can find a link in the description, and I'll also have some timestamps so you can jump around to your favorite parts. Let's go ahead and get in here. Okay, so it shuffled up a little bit. I can pull up last time as well, so you can just kind of see sort of what's changed here. So this is what it looked like last time. If we scroll down, there's some people looking at it right now. We had Leona, Thresh, Tahm, Rakan, Zyra, and then Blitz, Ali, Sona, Taric, and Janna kind of rounding it out. So this time we have Thresh, Leona, Rakan, Janna, Taric, Alistar, Tahm, Blitz, Misfortune, and Zyra. So sort of the biggest movers were Sona fell out of the top 10, and then Misfortune moved up quite a lot. Now, Misfortune I did bump up from tier 4 to tier 3 last time, thinking that she could potentially be pretty good as a relevant counterpick to Zyra. But she's shown that she's actually pretty good in quite a few situations bot lane, at least in theory. And that's why I went ahead and moved her up to the tier 2. These tier designations, tier 1 is something that in theory you could pick first pick, or it's a super strong counterpick against a bunch of first picks. So that's good into almost anything. So if you're first or second pick and you just don't know much information about the enemy team, these are usually pretty good picks. Tier 2, also really strong, but it's more often that they're either a little bit more compositional dependent, they have a little bit less raw power, or there are more counter picks available to them, is kind of the tier 2 way of framing it. And then tier 3 are champions that are still pretty good in the right situations, but once again, it's a step down in terms of, you know, they have even more specific applications, even more counterplay available against them, or even more sort of composition restraints, all right? So on the tier list, the top 10 are always tier 1 and tier 2, and then 11 through 20 are always tier 3, and then after that, there's no numbers basis. These are just things that are like, kind of viable, you know, in the right situations, they can definitely be good. And then tier 5 are things that people sometimes play as support that I just really don't recommend most of the time. So the stuff that I would recommend is mostly tier 1 and tier 2, and then some tier 3. If you're going deeper than tier 3, you know, do it at your own peril. If it's deeper than the top 20, do it at your own peril. But there are some gems down there in certain situations. Okay, so Thresh. So I moved Thresh up 1. I think Thresh is the best overall blind pick support right now. I think he's good in just almost every situation. And if you're a good Thresh player, now that's a major caveat here. If you haven't played Thresh a lot, practice him a lot in normals, or, you know, consider picking another champion. He is very hard to play, but I think that he's in the best place now than he has been all year. I think that you will start seeing competitive teams pick him up. He's pretty good if they moderate some of the poke damage a little bit more, like if they nerf Comet. I don't know if they will, but if they nerf Comet, then he'll definitely be even stronger. But I still think he's strong anyways. So what's changed about Thresh? Why is he so good in this preseason? What's helped him out? Well, he is an Aftershock user, so that helps. Aftershock is the most overpowered rune right now, I think. Arcane Comet's pretty good as well, but I've talked about this in past videos. Aftershock is just ridiculous. And a lot of it's because it's on a 20-second cooldown. So it does really nice damage, and it's on a low cooldown, and it gives you just a ton of extra armor and magic resist. And one of the historical problems of Thresh is that he's surprisingly squishy. early on. He only starts with 28 armor. A lot of other tanks in the bot lane start with like 44. Like Leona, Braum, Alistar all have 44 armor, so he's at a major disadvantage right there. But he does get armor over time with his souls. But honestly, it's not as much as you would think because he doesn't get armor per level, right? So you know, all the other tanks like Leona will get like 3 armor per level or something. So he has to pick up like 4 or 5 souls per level to equal out with Leona. So he does catch up like in the very late game. If he's getting a lot of souls, he'll kind of catch up. But for most of the game, he's going to be a lot less tanky than most of the pure tanks. And this is something that a lot of people don't realize when they play him, that this should affect your playstyle. So he should not take as many hooks as people often take with him. So when you land it, you don't have to go in on it. You can, but you don't have to. Sometimes just landing the hook and just allowing your allies to get some good poke on them or to follow up with some crowd control of their own can be the best choice rather than going in, into 4 or 5 people. Now, sometimes you do want to go in like that, but, you need to think very carefully about it because he's designed to not be as tanky as someone like Leona because he's versatile, and that's the price that you pay. Thresh is not going to be the best at any very niche playstyle, right? Like he's not the best hard engaged champion, he's not the best peel champion, he's not the highest damage champion, but he's decent at all of these things, right? So he's kind of like your Swiss Army knife. He's not he doesn't excel at any one particular thing, but he's pretty good at a lot of different things. So that's reflected in his stats. They don't want him to have 44 armor because then he would just crowd out the other hard engaged champions. He would be too good with that. And so that he's balanced around needing a little bit more game knowledge and a little bit more finesse and good decision making to play him properly. So that's part of his thing. Now he does pretty good damage on his autos though. I mean, if you look at the Flay and how you'll want to level him up usually is you'll get 2 or 3 points in Flay and lane, and then you max your hook after that. I used to max the hook first, but getting more points in Flay helps you with Relic Shield. I'll explain that in a second. It helps you with Relic Shield, and then it also gives you extra damage on your autos. So it does not increase the cooldown. It increases the cost a little bit, but you get bonus magic damage on your attacks, which is collected souls plus whatever, up to a certain amount, up to 200% of your AD. So you're getting a certain percentage of your AD depending on how long you let it charge. And it doesn't say what the different thresholds are, but I think you have to charge it for probably 10 seconds or so to get the full charge out of it. But it does scale with souls, and you do get a certain percentage of your AD on top of it. So it does help you. It's primarily so that your auto attacks hurt more in lane when you hit people. And he does have a range to him. He has 450 range. So he actually has the same amount of range as who was someone that had really low range that someone was asking about yesterday? I can't remember. But he has surprisingly decent auto attack range in lane for someone who appears to be melee. So you can sneak in some autos, especially against other tank champions. If they try to go up and last hit with Targons or something. You can get a couple autos in there. It does improve the slow duration too, or the slow amount, which is pretty nice. That's going to make it easier to hit your hooks. And it does increase the magic damage. Not a ton, but a little bit. So yeah, and for the Targons does not, you don't get the execute bonus with Targons. So if you look at, you start off with Relic Shield. Because he doesn't count as a melee champion. So this makes him different from someone like Tahm, Leona, Alistar. They get the execution damage. So melee auto attacks execute minions below 200 to 285 health. So that means that it automatically kills them. So you get a bonus, whatever damage. If they're at 200, it just kills them instantly. With Thresh, you don't get that. It just does normal auto attack damage. So it makes it a lot harder to last hit minions if you get Relic Shield, which is what you should be getting on him. And so having that extra Flay damage helps balance this out a little bit to where you can actually land those auto attacks. And I'll tell you, it's a very big deal. getting that extra damage to help you out with Relic Shield. So this gets increasingly more difficult to proc this as the game goes on, when people, you know, especially your AD carry starts getting like 3 AD items, and they just like won't give you any of these procs on waves. It gets pretty hard to get the extra money later on, but this is still going to be the best for him. I really wish they would recode him to make him count as a melee champion. That would help so much, even if they lowered his attack range. I mean, they have that already with Vel'Koz. Vel'Koz counts as melee, even though he's ranged, which is kind of weird. I think, or what, his auto attacks count as melee. I don't think he counts as melee, but I think his autos do. So I wish they would do something like that with Thresh. And frankly, with Rakan, too. But, yeah, his range is 575. Yeah, his basic attacks don't use projectiles. And so I'm pretty sure his basic attacks are counted as melee. Which is bizarre. But anyways, I wish they would do that with Thresh and Rakan. That would help out. That would help him out with Knight's Vow, and it would help him out with Relic Shield. But anyways, so that's a big part of some of the limitations of Thresh in terms of like, just be careful. If you want to pick up Thresh, he is very good right now, but he's not going to be a squishy, and it is hard to last hit with Relic Shield, but this helps you out. And then, so the advantages of Thresh, why he's number 1, is that he does get Aftershock, which addresses some of these weaknesses that I mentioned before. So now he's already not that tanky, but when you get the Aftershock proc, then all of a sudden you are pretty tanky. So yeah, Leona goes up to, you know, whatever, 100-something armor and magic resist, but Thresh, you know, when he procs Aftershock, he's going to go up to like 60 or 70-something. So percentage-wise, he's actually getting a similar percentage increase to Leona. And that just makes him a lot more durable in the bot lane. It's a lot harder to kill him than it used to be, which is a major, major benefit, because that's been one of the things historically that has balanced him out, is that he's squishy, relatively squishy for a tank early game, and that's not the case anymore. So that gets rid of one of his weaknesses. Like, yes, he is going to be squishier than the other tanks, but relative to AD carries, relative to AP champions in the bot lane, relative to all of these other champions, he gains a lot from Aftershock. So it's a lot harder to kill him now than it was. Also, the itemization has changed recently in his favor, most notably with Ardent Censer becoming a much, much worse item. So that was, you know, one knock to Thresh, is that he can't really use Ardent Censer that well. He could. I mean, he does have an AP ratio, you know, on a few of his abilities, but he doesn't really want to have to buy that item. It was cute to be able to buy it, but frankly, it's obviously better on things like Janna, Sona, and they were kind of crowding him out of the space. So now he can get tankier items, such as Locket, Knight's Vow, things like that. Now, Knight's Vow is not amazing on him. People get it a lot of times, but remember, because he counts as ranged, he only gets the 6% damage transference instead of 12. So it's important to think about that, but that's one thing that has changed to benefit him, is Ardent Censer's no longer there. He's a lot tankier in the early game. He also has very favorable matchup, or a very favorable matchup against Leona. A good Thresh will crush Leona in lane. And the reason for this is when Leona tries to go in with her E, you can flay her back and it knocks her out of her engage. You can do this with a lot of champions. You can flay Lee Sin back, you can flay Kha'Zix back if he tries to jump in. There are a lot of... Leona's not squishy, but there are a lot of squishy assassin type of champions that try to jump forward in one way or another, and he's very good at peeling that back. And with Leona, it not only knocks her up or like out of the position, but it actually physically pushes her back. And this is different from Janna. Janna's tornado just knocks Leona up in the air very briefly, whereas Thresh actually pushes her back. And Leona gets extra damage on her Q, which we'll talk about here in a second, and extra range. So with Janna, you know, half the time, even if you manage to knock him up with the tornado ahead of time, she's still going to be in range to get that extra auto in with her Q for a ton of extra damage. So Thresh fixes that by physically knocking her back. And so the combo is, whenever Leona goes in, you flay her back, and then you step back a little bit, and then you hook her, and then that gives your AD carry a lot of time to just punish her big time for trying to go in. So, because she's not going to have the E to get on your AD carry anymore, you're just going to be able to free fire on her. Now, you probably won't kill her with that exchange, but you'll take her like half health. So that's pretty good. So he has a favorable matchup against Leona. He has become one of the premier peelers because Janna's been nerfed several times. This is important. So that opened up a space and a need for an additional peeler in the meta. So so Janna's not as strong as she once was. Who can step up and, you know, make sure that Rengar stays off of your Jinx, or who can step up and make sure that Leona is not just running wild bot lane, or that you have an answer to Alistar going in with his headbutt? Well, Thresh is the person. So, you know, he's not as good at peeling as Janna is, but he still peels very, very well with Flay and his ultimate and Dark Passage, the Lantern, being able to get people out of sticky situations. So he still has pretty good peel defensive capabilities, and he has Aftershock. And these other things that we've talked about. So because Janna fell a little bit in priority, she wasn't just unequivocally the queen of solo queue anymore. That opens up a space for Thresh to come in and be kind of this hybrid, really good peel champion who can also abuse Aftershock, and who has favorable matchups against a lot of the other top supports. Now, one other thing that the preseason has kind of helped with is Thresh historically can get poked pretty hard in lane. He doesn't have any extra heals or shields, and you know, a lot of his engage is conditional. It's predicated on hitting this Death Sentence hook, which is really hard to hit open field against other, you know, Platinum Plus players, but it can happen. You just usually have to do it out of a bush, or you have to distract him one way or another, or hit him with Flay first. So he has been able to get poked out historically, but Second Wind helps him a ton because now he gets all of this extra regen. Relic Shield, they also buffed this in the preseason to give you 2% of your missing health. So that's something new, which, you know, doesn't sound like a lot, but it does give you a decent amount. I mean, if you're missing like 300 health, you know, it's an extra 6 on top of the 15. So that's decent health regen, at least compared to what it used to be. And because they have nerfed things like Ardent Sensor, they've nerfed Redemption, you know, they've nerfed a lot of tank items, then he can actually get Banner of Command pretty early, which is something I've been doing, which I'll talk about that here in a second. And this is really nice because the build path includes an additional Rejuve bead. So that means that, you know, you can not only get a Rejuve bead from your Targon's Brace, which is the upgrade to Relic Shield, you can get an additional Rejuve bead right here, and you get Second Wind. And so all of those give you some pretty respectable early game health regeneration. So that allows you to get through champions like Nami harassing you to some extent. I mean, they're still going to be kind of rough early on, especially if you can't get any clean hook opportunities. But this certainly helps you quite a bit against poke champions, which has historically been, you know, a problem for Thresh. So that does help out, the fact that he can get 2 Rejuve beads. And I'm pretty sure the stat changes early gave him extra regen also. No, it gave him extra base attack. Okay. So it gave him extra base attack and base armor, which was nice. Now, the base attack is very good because, remember, that also affects his flay damage. So that helps out a lot. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much why I think Thresh is really good now. He's become a really good peeler who can also abuse Aftershock. So not a complete replacement for Janna, but kind of a nice sort of hybrid champion that can step in and fill that role. He's tankier now, and he can weather better harassment now. And he has pretty good itemization with what I think is a really undervalued tank item that I've been trying out a lot lately with Banner of Command. And in addition, he does all of the nice Thresh things. He can still make big plays landing hooks later. He can get people out with Lantern. He can make really nice plays with Flay. He has good early game damage, late game utility, great itemization options. So that makes him really good. And that is the final thing that I do want to mention, is that he does have Engage. So if I look at my op.gg here, like, you'll see a lot of people just are not playing Engage champions these days. If we look at these, like, some of these games, like, we have no Engage. It's like Swain, Kha'Zix, Talon, Varus. Like, Varus can kind of engage. They don't have great Engage. I mean, I guess they have, like, Fiddlesticks. But people just aren't playing the tank, like, hard Engage champions that they have in the past as much. Like, you're not seeing Sejuani as much. you know, right here, we just really didn't have any engage. You know, we have Xerath, Ezreal, Yi, Akali, and over there, they don't have any engage either. So a lot of players, a lot of people are playing these poke kind of champions, but they're not playing engage champions. So having someone who can start a fight is very helpful. And that's part of why Thresh, Leona, and Rakan are all at the top of my list, is because they can start fights. When other people are picking all of these assassin, you know, squishy type of champions, they are the people who can start these fights, and all of them have really nice crowd control, which is great against assassins, and they're all pretty tanky themselves, so they can't get picked off by assassins. So I think that tanky engage is kind of the top of the food chain right now for supports. I've heard other people, you know, commenting on this patch, especially Skara. I love Skara's patch notes. Be sure to check him out if you've never seen him on YouTube. But he has really good patch notes, and he was talking about how he thinks Poke is kind of the king bot lane in terms of supports. And Poke is good, and we'll talk about some Poke champions, most notably Misfortune here in a second. But I still think that the hard engage is really nice because other people just aren't picking those type of champions. And Thresh is versatile too. Like, he can team fight, and he can pick people off with his hook. So he's the Swiss Army knife of supports, and these things that I've talked about have really propelled him to be the #1 slot right now, I think. Okay, so that's a lot of Thresh, but I just wanted to justify why I think he's up there. And keep in mind, he is a really high skill cap support. Like, he's the hardest support in the game to play. So he's never going to have a very high win percentage, right? He's at about 50%, which is pretty nice for him. But yeah, he's never going to be the type of champion with like a 55% win rate or something like Sona was at a little bit ago, just because he's too difficult to play. He's balanced around that. So people that don't play him a lot are going to be pretty bad on him. So that's going to lower his win rate. It's kind of like any sort of high skill cap champion. It's like, you know, Riven is rarely going to have a super high win rate. Zed, those type of champions. Okay, Leona. I talked about Leona a ton last patch, so I'm not going to rehash a lot of that, but not much has changed here. Oh, and these are the runes that I recommend for Thresh as well. Aftershock, Fauna Life, Conditioning, Second Wind, and then Zombie Ward and Genius Hunter. I've made numerous videos about this, so I'm not going to cover it a lot right now, but Zombie Ward plus Ingenious Hunter is the go-to combination for supports. I don't see a lot of top-end supports getting this. I think eventually they will, but certainly even at kind of Platinum and lower, it's very, very important to get this. It gives you so much extra vision, and in those elos, other people just are not going to buy vision as much. Like, the jungler's not going to get as much, mid laner's not going to get as much, so the more vision you can get, the better. And Ingenious Hunter is really, really good with a lot of great items out there, like Locket, Redemption, your Sweeper, Banner of Command, Knight's Vow. There are a ton of really good, really powerful items that have an active on it that can be reduced by Ingenious Hunter. So Thresh is no different. So I think, you know, it affects Locket, Knight's Vow. Let me change the itemization around here just a little bit. Okay, and let me talk about Banner here real quick before I get on the Leona train. You can get it on Leona too, and it's decent, but it's best on Thresh, and I'll talk about why here just really quickly. So this is an item that I really, you know, for a long time have disrespected because it's been outshined by other items. So, you know, all last season, there's really no reason to get Banner, you know, back when Knight's Vow was really overpowered. And tanks really weren't that great last season for consistently for any substantial length of time, right? And so that's another thing, is this is primarily a tank item now. Yeah, it just got outshined by Locket, got outshined by Knight's Vow, primarily those two, but there were just other items as well. It just really wasn't that important, and it was, you know, the game really revolved around a lot of team fights too, and so it was really important just to get the Locket, the Knight's Vow, and then sometimes Redemption or Ardent Sensor, or just some other item other than this. It was really a team fight meta for a lot of last season. Well, and they did change this item, I believe, in the middle of last season. Yes. So they changed it around 7-12. They changed it from Glacial Shroud into building out of Aegis of the Legion, which I didn't really think that much of at the time, but now that I've built this a couple of times, this is actually a really good change for the style of play that Banner encourages. So, first of all, if you look at the right stats, and this has been changed a lot over time to try to make it more viable, they lowered the cost a lot. So it used to be 2,900 gold, which was just really bad. It used to give AP, but that's way too expensive. So they lowered it to 2,200, which is a very competitive support price point. So that's really good. And that was near the end of Season 6. But it just didn't have its chance to shine. So let's look at it really quick. What do you get for this 2,200 gold? Well, the base stats alone on it, and they're decent stats, give you 2,300 gold. So it's already 108% efficient, which is pretty good. So that's even without the active or the passive or anything else. It gives you that. And now you get 20% movement speed. So that takes it up to 3,000. So it's, 144% efficient now. So that's pretty good too. And this movement speed is important because that allows you to go and like rotate to other lanes faster, drop this, and then rotate back to where you need to be on the field. So having that movement speed to be able to rotate and move around is the exact kind of thing that you want to be doing with Banner. You want to be, walking to side lanes, dropping the banner, and then getting back with your team while the minion pressures a side lane. Okay, and the big change is the advent of the Ingenious Hunter Ruby Sightstone build that I'm always talking about. So that gives you 60% cooldown reduction on this, which means that you're going to be able, and it's only 120 second cooldown, which is pretty nice. That means that every like 40, 45 to 50 seconds or so, you're going to be able to drop one of these. That's like, every other wave, pretty much. You're going to be able to put a banner on it, which is really powerful for side lane pressure. Now, don't forget that if these banner minions, or these like empowered minions, if they kill things, you get the gold for it. So last night, if you were watching on 12-6 on the stream, I got this in a 5v5 game. Well, I get it in a lot of 5v5 games, but there was one where we were really far behind in this game. So if we go and look at... we were behind a lot. For a lot of the game, like right here, we're behind, like almost 5,000 gold, and we just stayed really far behind for a lot of the game. But I was able to pressure side lanes with the banner, stall it out, and give us more time to win the game. And it's not going to tell me, but this banner, when I looked at it kind of sort of near the end of the game, it had given me like 1,200 gold. So really, it was only a 1,000 gold item. And we would not have been able to go out there, so I'm not taking gold from any split pushers because it was too scary to go out there. We were pushed into our base. At one point, I think we had 1 or 2 inhibitors down. So it just buys you time. It gives you that extra map pressure. Its stats are pretty good by themselves. And as I mentioned earlier, being able to get the rejuvenation bead early is very nice, especially for Thresh against poke champions in lane. And getting an early Raptor Cloak is nice because that allows you to get back to lane faster and to rotate to ward to try to make plays on the map. So it's a pretty nice early item to pick up as the Raptor Cloak. And, Thresh doesn't really want to get Redemption. Knight's Vow is okay on him, but this is one of the only viable items that adds additional lane pressure. And it's really hard to siege now because a lot of people just are not playing good siege champions, and there's just so much skirmishing going on as well that having that additional map pressure to punish people for trying, well, that kind of goes against the skirmishing, but just trust me, it puts a lot of side lane pressure on maps. It has good stats, and it just fits Thresh's team, or just sort of his synergy, what he wants to be contributing to his team very well by adding additional map pressure. So I think that that's good because he can't use Redemption that well, and that's the key. So he doesn't use Redemption very well, and he doesn't need as much tankiness as some other champions because he doesn't have to go in. So he doesn't have to be as tanky as Leona because he should not be getting hit as much in fights because you just want to hook people and then stay back and peel in most team fights. So use your ultimate to peel, use your fillet to peel. You can go in and fight if you want to as well, but he's not designed to stay in combat and be very close for extended periods of time like Leona is, because he's just not as tanky as she is. So because he's hanging in the back, he likes the tank stats, but he doesn't have to go as hardcore. He's not completely priced into getting Knight's Vow or any other super tanky type of item. So it's a pretty good utility item that gives him a light amount of tankiness and a heavy amount of utility. Okay. So Leona, what's up with Leona? Well, she's still the same old Leona that she has been. She's super tanky. So one thing that I mentioned last time for a long time is that she's particularly abusive with Aftershock because her W gives you a lot of bonus armor and magic resist, and then Aftershock scales off of your total armor and magic resist. So when you turn on Aftershock and you turn on W, you get just an insane amount of tankiness because they stack with each other. And she ends up getting over 100 armor at level 2, which is just ridiculous. It's unstoppable. So she's still very, very good. There is a decent amount of counterplay to her. Not a decent amount, but there are certain champions that counter her really hard, most notably Tahm Kench. Morgana's good against her, and Thresh is good against her, and Janna is good against her. So there is counterplay. The reason that I don't have Leona at number 1, and a lot of people will probably have her at number 1, is because she plays very poorly when you're behind. So if you're ahead, if you're snowballing, if you can get a nice 2v2 advantage in lane, then she's awesome. She's, you know, really difficult to stop. Because she does so much damage and she has so many engage tools. She has her E, she has her R, and she has just a ton of lockdown. So if you hit them with the E and then you R them, then you Q them, or whichever order, you're going to lock somebody down for like, you know, 3 seconds or so. And that's more than enough time to kill him. So she's just the best abuser of Aftershock, probably in the game. Certainly in the support role, I think she's the best because of the way that her W and her Aftershock interact. So, ton of damage early game and in the mid game. A lot of crowd control. Lots of really nice engage tools. But, you know, if you fall behind, you don't peel very well. You can't actually displace or knock anybody back. All you can do is try to hook somebody with your E and just like, you know, hit them with your R and your Q. Just like very like mild peels. And of course, if you try to go into a fight and your team's losing, you have no escapes. And if you want to try to save somebody who's getting caught out, you're probably going to die yourself. Whereas Thresh can throw a lantern and probably still save people if they click on it. Leona doesn't have a lot of options. I mean, when she goes in, she's going in. So yeah, you might be able to save somebody if you go and like E in there and R and just help your, you know, your jungler escape when they try to counter jungle and get caught. You're going to die for it though. So that's sort of one of her core problems is she's very snowbally. She's very good if you're ahead, but if you fall behind, she can have some problems. So check out last patch notes if you want more in-depth analysis of her. I talked about her for like 20 minutes, and this time I talked about Thresh for 20. But she's still very, very good. She did get a mild nerf this patch. She lost 20 damage early on her W, which is significant, but I still think she's going to do a ton of damage. Until they nerf Aftershock, I think she's still going to be a great pick. Now, Rakan is somebody that you're not going to see prioritized very highly on a lot of other tier lists, but I think he's really, really strong right now. He does not have favorable matchup into Leona or Thresh, really, but he's more reliable engage than either one of those. And so when your team just really needs some hardcore engage, he's great. And he has the most versatile build path of all of them because he's like a hybrid engage tank type of champion that's also an enchanter. So what has made Rakan good? Well, Aftershock, similar to Thresh, you know, one of Rakan's big problems is if he goes in, then he's not very tanky, and so he can get blown up pretty easily, kind of like Thresh, and Aftershock solves a lot of those problems. Also, he can get poked out early, you know, by Sona, Nami, things like that, so Second Wind solves some of those problems, and he, in theory, can get Banner of Command to help out with the side lane pushes. Because he, you know, kind of like Thresh, he's not designed to sit there and combat the whole time. He wants to start a fight and then jump back out. And so you don't need to be as tanky in terms of your itemization as you would need to be if you're someone like Leona or Alistar. So that does free you up if you need to get that extra reju bead early and then eventually turn that into a Banner of Command, or you can get a reju beat early and turn it into Redemption later. So he's very versatile, and he does have the ability to get an early reju beat, which is nice. So he can adapt very well to how the game's going. So if you need to, you know, if your AD carries really far ahead, you can get Ardent Censer, kind of the classic Rakan build. You can just go with the, you know, Ardent Censer, Redemption type of build. If you know, if your team's behind, if you're losing and you just want to be able to roam a little bit better, you could go something like Banner of Command to put extra pressure on the side lanes. You can rush Talisman pretty early and just try to make picks with him if you want to go that route. You know, if your AD carry specifically is really far ahead, you can go for something like a an Ardent Sensor plus Zeke's Convergence build, which will give you a bit more tankiness than something like Redemption, and it'll double down on your AD carry. So it'll give him a ton of extra on-hit damage, and it'll give him the on-hit effects with Ardent Sensor, which can be very strong. So he just has a ton of different ways that he can adapt to different game states. His itemization is very fluid. And he's very safe. I mean, he's a lot safer than someone like a Leona or like a Thresh, especially when he's roaming, because his W allows you to get away from almost anything. He's kind of like the Janna of engaged tanks, right? So Janna, part of why Janna is really strong is she's almost impossible to catch and kill. You know, so if you're trying to go ward the enemy jungler and the jungler just pops up out of nowhere, usually you can get away as Janna. And Rakan's the same way. He has lots of great escape tools. You know, you can W and jump across walls. If they get right on you, you can quickness, you know, use your ult and then just run away. You can jump to allies if you get in range. So you have a lot of different escape tools, and that translates into better vision because you're going to be able to go in there and get deeper vision in the enemy jungle because you don't have to be scared that they're going to kill you. At least not as scared as you should be if you're someone like a Sona trying to go in there, or you're someone like a Leona trying to go in there. So that's going to allow you a lot better vision control, which really complements the Ingenious Hunter zombie ward package as well. So he's just great. He's total package. Just the thing is, early on, before you hit 6, he is vulnerable to all-in champions like Leona, like Thresh. They can present problems for him, but he does scale probably even better than they do because he has the option of going plus healing and shielding build, which is really, really nice with his own shields. So, you know, he can go something like you know, Locket, Redemption, Ardent Sensor, that kind of build, and just have like huge teamfight presence. He can also go Mikhail's, which is not an amazing item on him, but it's okay because at least he benefits from the plus healing and shielding, which is very nice against some of these compositions that run a lot of CC. So if the enemy has an Ashe, a Morgana, something like that, then Mikhail's can get you out of some sticky situations like that also. So he doesn't have any awful matchups. I mean, Leona's pretty bad, but he can work around it. And he's just very flexible, very versatile. So I think he's excellent. A lot of people are going to put him lower because people aren't picking Zyra as much right now. But I still think he's an excellent choice most of the time. You just got to be careful if Leona's open. She gets banned a lot. But if Leona's open, it's rough. He could do all right versus Thresh. He can do all right versus Thresh. Thresh is a little harsh, but he can do all right. Okay. Janna's the next one. I've talked about Janna a ton historically. I mean, you can't hold Janna back for very long. She's in the conversation for best support of all time in terms of like solo queue effectiveness at the support role. I played like 600 something games with her last season with a 57% win rate. By far my highest winning champion. So yeah, I mean, she did get nerfs, obviously, fairly soon. But there have been a few things that have changed that have been in her favor. So she started off the preseason just in a really terrible spot. A lot of people have been buying, like, just leveling up W first and trying to make her aggressive in lane. I don't really like that build. If you want to get aggressive in lane, I would just play somebody else, you know. If I'm picking Janna, unless, I guess, if you pick her early and they pick into you, and you feel like you need to go something aggressive, then you can, but I would still just play for the mid to late game with her. Just farm it out in lane. She's still going to outscale everybody else. Like, you can fight if the jungler shows up, but let's just be real. You know, she's not designed to be an aggressive early game champion. And I think trying to force it by rushing something like Frost Queen's Claim or like leveling up your W first, I don't know. Like, you can find success with that. I just feel like that's not really who she is. But yeah, she's still really fast. She still has great scaling on her shield. Now, it does have a longer cooldown early, so your laning phase is a lot worse than it used to be. But she still has that. She still has excellent peel, excellent scaling, especially with Monsoon. Now, they nerfed her directly several times. They nerfed her shield, was the most notable one. And then they nerfed Ardent Sensor, and that's what was really good with her. But you can still get Ardent, you can still get Redemption, you can get Locket if you want to. And you can get, you can eventually get the Ruby Sightstone and Genius Hunter build. I mean, she can build just about anything and be relevant. I mean, Banner of Command's not like super amazing on her, so maybe you wouldn't get that, but she's okay. She has a lot of build options, and she's great at peeling. And one of the reasons she has struggled, other than the direct nerfs, is that she did not use Aerie very well. She can use Aerie, but the damage side of it, as I said before, she's just not a good early game poke Aerie user. So she still likes Aerie because now that they've nerfed it, they didn't touch the healing shielding part of it. They just nerfed the damage part. So that's actually pretty good for Janna because now champions like Lulu and Sona that could bully her early don't have as much bully power with Aerie. Sona just got nerfed really hard this patch, and that's her main arch rival in the bot lane. Early game, Sona just crushes Janna. And so now that Sona's going to have a much worse time, and you're just going to see a lot less Sona, probably, then Janna's going to be good. So yeah, that's kind of what's been happening, is people are starting to play more of these tanks, like Leona, Thresh, Alistar, and Janna's very good into those, because those can't really pressure her that hard in lane, because she can disengage their engage, and she's going to outscale them. So when the tank supports start getting really strong, Janna's a very good counter pick to them. She still scales well, she just has a pretty rough early game. But if they don't punish you for it, then she can get away with it. So I think she's very good. And this is even reflected, you know, in the numbers here, that she's already gone back up to like the 4th place. And a lot of people are sleeping on her. You know, she's got a 53% win rate. So a lot of people have been, you know, thinking that she's done, that she's all washed up, she's not going to be that great. Yeah, she is. She still has really good matchups, especially into Leona. So I think she's definitely making a comeback. Okay, Taric. So Taric is good. I personally do not win a lot with Taric, and I think a big part of it is that he is extremely low range, low mobility, low threat in lane. And so he's kind of like Janna, but every time I'm playing Taric, I'm just wondering, I'm like, why am I just not playing Janna? You know, I just feel like he gets out-competed by Janna. Now, he does have better itemization pathing because he can go enchanter stuff like Janna, but he can also go tank stuff. So you can get things like Knight's Vow, and then he can still get like Knight's Vow, Locket, Redemption. So he can make use of things like Locket and like Knight's Vow that Janna really can't. And he does scale very well off of plus healing and shielding, but he's just not as safe as she is. He can't get the deep vision. If your team dies or is going to die in a team fight, he's certainly going to die. He's not going to escape. He doesn't rotate as fast around the map. His shield is not as big as Janna's shield. He doesn't peel back. You know, he has virtually no peel. He just sits there and tries to, you know, crowd control with his one stun. He doesn't have as much crowd control. So to make up for that, though, he is very tanky. He has area of effect healing. He has his ultimate, of course, which makes it very difficult to kill people if you have enough time to get it off. You know, if you just barely get in range, and this happens all the time when I play Taric. Let's say that an assassin's trying to dive your AD carry, you press your ult. Well, they have 2.5 seconds to kill them before your ult goes off. And a lot of times they die, because there's just so much damage in the meta right now that if you try to use your ult reactively to an assassin, a lot of times it's just going to be too slow. So yeah, it is great with like organized teams where you have very clean initiations and you can use that ultimate proactively. That's the best time to do it. But in solo queue, it feels increasingly rare. So I do think that Taric is good. I just feel like there are a lot more ways that things can go wrong when you pick Taric than if you pick someone like Janna. Because he's going to have a hard time against poke in lane too, just like Janna will. Because his heal is very inefficient until you get it to like maybe level 2 or 3. So like level 4 or 5 in lane, you can start using his heal. It's pretty mana intensive though. So he's okay. I think you'll see him in pro games. I think if you're a Taric specialist, he can be good. But most of the time, just out of the blue, I would just recommend Janna most of the time. If you want that kind of effect, if you want someone who's going to scale really hard, that's a great team fighter, that can get a lot of enchanter items. So like Janna or even Rakan. And the thing about Taric also is he has no engage. Like he's tanky, but he doesn't have escapes and he doesn't have engage. So like Rakan and Janna have a lot of escapes, and Rakan has engage, and Leona and Thresh at least have really hardcore engage. They're not great with escapes, but at least they engage. He doesn't have engage, and he doesn't escape. He just kind of like is there, you know, in fights, and his roaming is not that great. So he's all right. Like I said, if you're a Taric specialist, you can definitely win a lot of games with him. He has some of the best itemization of anybody out there, you know, because he can get the full suite of tank items and the full suite of enchanter items. In theory, if everyone just lines up and does a perfect 5v5 team fight and you have really crisp, clean engages, he's awesome. He might be the best support for that. Just in solo queue where everyone's just run around and it's the, you know, the clown fiesta. I just feel like he's not as great in that environment. Speaking of someone who is good in that environment, though, we have Alistar. So I tried Alistar a lot earlier. Not a lot, but some earlier in the season. I did not do that well with him at all. But I think I was using the wrong runes, and I just didn't really understand the meta that well. I played him like 5 times on the first day, or something like that. Maybe even more. Oh, that's from Season 7. Yeah, I did not do well with him at all in Season 7. I thought I won more than that. Maybe not. Was I really 0? Maybe I was 0-4. I don't know. It's 5 games. Who cares? Like it's nothing. It's a drop in the bucket. But I do think that he is very strong. I think you'll see him in pro play, and I think these changes helped him. So Sona getting nerfed really hard helps him a lot because that's the premier poke champion. He has kind of a hard time against poke, but he can get second wind. He can get Targons if he wants. He can get that additional reju bead. You know, he can turn that into Banner of Command if he wants, or down the line he could turn it into something like a Warmogs, which is actually pretty good. Like Warmogs plus Locket, I'm learning more and more, is a really powerful combination on support because that counters like poke very well. The Warmogs does. So if you're getting poked out by that Xerath or you know, by the Misfortune or something like that later in the game, you just heal right through it with Warmogs. And the fact that it's a ton of bonus health is an awesome combination with Locket. You start giving shields of like 900 or something in the late game after you get your Warmogs, your Ruby Sightstone, and your Locket. You just give these like massive shields. So I think that Warmogs is actually something that's pretty decent, and that builds out a reju beat as well. So classically Warmog has kind of seemed like a bad idea on supports because, you know, you just want to get other team fighting items. But I think it's certainly decent on Thresh and Rakan because they don't get as much benefit out of Knight's Vow. With Alistar, you might still want to get Knight's Vow early, but it's a decent kind of late game option. And then Alistar, of course, has his heal as well. So he has an additional heal to get him through Pokken Lane. So now he's pretty good. If he gets second wind, you know, and like he can get early reju beats if he has to, and then he gets his natural heal off of his passive, he can make it through a lot of early game poke, especially after the Airy nerfs, especially after the Sona nerf. So that's one kind of weakness, is that he can get poked out. Now he's someone who can, he's kind of versatile, not as versatile as like Thresh or Rakan, but he's pretty versatile in that he can full combo somebody and knock him up. So it's kind of like a Leona engage with his WQ combo. It does pretty decent damage. It's faster than Rakan's. Now Rakan's is similar where he jumps forward and then dashes up, but this has a much larger radius. Like this has a 365 radius. I think Rakan's radius got nerfed to like 210 or something like that. So this has a much larger hitbox on it. It does more damage, and it's faster because it doesn't have that little delay on the knockup. It does take 2 abilities to do it though. So you can do that. That's kind of a classic Alistar engage, but you can also split these up. So you could flash Pulve to knock somebody up and then headbutt them back into your team if you want to. You can use your Pulverize just to knock somebody up and then hold on to your headbutt and wait on the assassin to go on your AD carry and then use your headbutt to peel. This is much better peel than Leona because it actually knocks them back. It doesn't just stun them, but it actually, you know, knocks them away from your team. So he has much better peel options than Leona. He has similar engage to Leona. He has a lot less damage early on than Leona, and that's kind of one of the things to consider, and he's a lot less tanky early on than Leona because her W interaction is not as good. But Aftershock is still excellent on him. And he does have that third piece of crowd control if you need it. Now, I really wish they would buff this a little bit and just make it to where you need like 3 ticks instead of 5 to be able to do this. I think that would help him a ton. But being able to get 5 ticks means you have to stay on top of him for 2.5 seconds before it works. Is a little gimmicky, but it does some pretty nice damage, and it is an extra stun. And then, of course, he's excellent at level 6 tower dives, and this is why they use him in professional play a lot of times. You can set up some really hardcore tower dives, bot lane, level 6, and he's just pretty much unkillable. He gets 55% reduction from turrets. In addition to Aftershock giving him a ton of armor. So he's very, very good at diving. So yeah, he's just kind of a blend of, you know, good melee specialist who has some nice sustain in lane, that's just flexible. He has good peel, he has good engage. His guaranteed is... or his engage is much more guaranteed than something like Thresh's. And in exchange, he's not as safe. You know, he can't escape as well. And it's not long range. Or it's not like... it's not as safe, as I just said. So Thresh, if you're behind, you can still hook somebody and apply poke to the enemy team. You don't have to go in. With Alistar, you're going in. And if it's a bad fight, you're going to die, probably. So he shares that with Leona. He just has the option of hanging back and peeling if you're behind a little bit more. So, you know... less damage, less tankiness early, more utility later. He's a very strong champion. You'll see a lot of him in pro play, especially if they nerf Comet, which I suspect they'll probably nerf Comet at some point. Then you'll see him a lot more. But they might nerf Aftershock as well. You know, if I were going to nerf a couple of things as Riot, I would nerf Aftershock and Comet, because I think both of those are problematic. They do kind of sort of balance each other out, but they're both just too strong. Okay, so Alistar, very good right now, especially with the changes. Now, he can also go Revitalize, so if you don't need to go second wind, if they don't have a lot of poke, you know, he can go Revitalize if you want to. That'll help with your Roar, and if for some reason you want to go something like a Redemption kind of build, you can do that. That's something I forgot to mention with Taric, is that in the patch notes, they did also change Revitalize. Well, I closed it, but... That actually was a really nice buff for Taric. They nerfed his armor a little bit, but his heals and shields now get a bonus when they apply to himself, where for some reason that didn't happen earlier with Revitalize. So that was a nice little buff to Taric as well. Okay, so Alistar, really good. Not as versatile as Thresh, not as hardcore early as Leona, but arguably the best roaming out of all of them. He has very nice hardcore guaranteed engage, so you will see him a lot. I think he is very good right now. He might deserve to be tier 1, but I've just got him down in tier 2 right now. But he's definitely very, very good, and Taric could definitely be tier 1 too if you're a very good Taric player in the right composition. They're just not quite as universal, like blind pickable, I don't think, as these champions, but they're both very good. Okay, Tahm Kench is another one. I had him up near the top, and he is very good. The problem is, you know, he's kind of falls in that camp of a peeler tank, sort of like Taric, and he doesn't have very good engage at all. And that's kind of a problem in this meta. Like, you really need engage because a lot of teams are just not going to have it. So Tahm Kench is a very hard counter to Leona. He's the hardest counter in the game. He's extremely good against Thresh. He's pretty good against Rakan. He's pretty good against Alistar. So he's very good at a lot of these hard engage tanks. So I wouldn't first pick him, but he's a very strong counter pick if you get good visibility on their team. So, you know, just keep that in mind whenever you play him. Now, he does have really nice rotation pressure with his ult, so he'd be a pretty good Banner of Command user because he wants to hang back and peel anyways, and so losing a bit of tankiness by not getting something like Knight's Vow as early, you can handle that. You can get Knight's Vow like second after Banner, and then you can put the Banner in the side waves, and if you need to, you can ult to get back to your team fast enough to be relevant. So, you know, you can use his ultimate well like that. And then also he has a good combination with Zeke's Convergence. You can ult, cancel it, it'll proc Zeke's. It goes on a 10-second cooldown. And if you're going to get the, you know, ingenious Ruby Sightstone build, then you can get the cooldown on Zeke's down to like 20 seconds. And so, you know, and it lasts for 10 seconds. If we look at Zeke's. Has an internal cooldown of 45 seconds. Now, most champions can't get that low on their cooldown. A lot of them can, at least not tank champions that would want this, like Karma can, but like Blitz can, but there aren't many champions that can do it. Tahm Kench can, because whenever you start your ult, it triggers it. Then you cancel your ult before anyone takes it, and then it goes on a 10-second cooldown. So if you look at Kench here, this is a cool interaction I've never heard anyone talk about, but I've been talking about it ever since Zeke's got reworked, and this has been a really cute interaction. But Tahm Kench hasn't really been great in the meta because engaged tanks haven't been great. Well, engaged tanks are great right now, so Tahm's definitely rising in power. But yeah, you can cast this if you take damage or just like move to cancel it, then it only goes on a 10-second cooldown. But the cast of it, even if you don't complete it, does trigger Zeke's. So this gives your AD carry basically 25% bonus magic damage on hit. It's over 2 seconds, but it's basically every hit does 25% on hit. They buffed it a few patches ago. It used to be 17.5%, probably about 10 patches ago now. It used to be 17.5%, and they made it a full 25. So that means if your AD carry, and I'm not sure if this applies to crits or not. So if you crit somebody for like 800, I would doubt that it would give you an extra 200 damage on that, but maybe it does. I don't know how it interacts with crits, honestly. But even like, if your AD carry is just hitting for 200, if it doesn't include crits, and, you know, now they get an extra 50 on-hit magic damage, that's pretty good. That's quite a lot of damage. And then you also, you know, deal 40 magic damage per second. And this lasts for 10 seconds. That's important to note. And I'm pretty sure it goes on cooldown as you activate it. So like once you start it, then the 45 seconds starts. Okay, so if this gets reduced by, because that's how Sweeper works, and Sweeper's a similar thing where you start it, it lasts for 10 seconds, but the cooldown starts when you start the item, not when the 10 seconds ends. So its cooldown with Ruby Sightstone and a fully stacked Ingenious Hunter is only 18 seconds. So that means that you can literally have this up more than 50% of the game. You could just spam this and just constantly give your AD carry 25% bonus on hit magic damage. Then you would constantly have a slow field and deal an extra 40 magic damage. So, I mean, that's pretty good, right? It's pretty good. And then the base stats on it are decent, you know. 102%. It's not bad. So it's okay. A lot of people don't get this item, but I think that if you have an AD carry who's really far ahead, especially something that you know, builds a lot of attack speed, so they get to trigger this on-hit damage even more. So something like Twitch, especially someone who uses Lethal Tempo, which just got buffed this patch. So things like Twitch, things like Callista, you know, stuff that's going to build a lot of attack speed. This is going to be really, really good, potentially. So that's a unique interaction with Tahm Kench, that he can get that cooldown to 18 seconds because his ult is only on a 10-second cooldown if you cancel it. So that's a really cool interaction that helps him out. But the main reason you would pick him is because he just hard counters Leona and Thresh. And he's very tanky himself. He's not going to get poked out as much early on, which is a problem that he has. He has very good synergy with Jhin, who's becoming very popular. The reason is if you hit somebody with Tongue Lash, Jin's going to be able to hit him with his W most of the time, and that's going to allow you to go up and auto-attack him a couple of times and eat him. If you eat him, they're dead. Jhin can drop a trap, and you can set him right on top of it. You can spit him out right on top of it. If Jhin gets into trouble, you can eat him and run him to the back line, and then spit him out, and then he can ult and attack a lot of people. So he has a lot of really good synergies with Tahm Kench in a variety of ways. I almost got to Diamond in... well, I did get to Diamond in Season 6, but I almost did it in like the first 2 months of Ranked because I just duoed with this Jhin, and we went like 18-2 or something. It was like the biggest win streak I've ever been on. And now it was a different kind of game back then. And Tahm Kench and Jhin have both been nerfed a lot since then. But we just played Tahm Kench and Jhin every single game. And I went from like Platinum 5 to Platinum 1 in 3 days. It was insane. And so, yeah, they have very, very good synergy. And now that Jin's coming back on the block and people are playing a lot more Thresh, Leona, This might be Tahm Kench's time to shine. I have played him some, haven't played him a lot, to mixed success. I think I'm like mid-40s with him. Yeah, only after 9 games though. So it's not bad. It's not bad. Then obviously I played him a ton, like I was saying, in Season 6. So I was as high in the first half of the season before they nerfed him a lot and before they nerfed Jhin, main partner in crime a lot. You know, I was up in the 60% with him, but we fell down a little bit over time. But he's still very good, and I think it's, you know, he's definitely making a comeback. So he's an excellent counter pick. Blitz is pretty good. Oh, and his runes are kind of weird. That's another thing. Is like he doesn't use Aftershock very well. He uses Guardian. So if they ever buff Guardian and nerf Aftershock, that's going to help him out a ton. Which, if I was Riot's balance team, I would take Guardian down to at least a 30-second cooldown, or maybe even a 20-second to match Aftershock, or nerf Aftershock and make it a 30-second cooldown. I think they should be the same cooldown. Just to kind of mirror each other in lane. But anyways, you could go Guardian, Font of Life, Conditioning, Second Wind, Zombie Ward, and Genius Hunter. Another build you can potentially try is Glacial Augment. This is okay because because he has such a strong interaction with being able to stack 3 auto attacks on him. So with this, you could Tongue Lash him, walk up, auto attack him, and then unless they flash, they're not getting away. And then once you get that 3rd auto and eat them, they're usually dead. So that's a really powerful, especially against other melee supports like a Alistar, Leona, something like that. Then that's very good. And then you get Biscuit, Delivery, Magical Footwear, and Celestial Body. All of these are good. And of course, Zombie Ward and Genius Hunter. Now, you can also go for like Conditioning and Second Wind if it's a tough lane. I'm always very hesitant to give up Zombie Ward and Genius Hunter, but if it's a tough lane, you can go this build, and then as a secondary, get the Second Wind. Yeah, and he's just a really good Ruby, Locket, Knight's Vow user. Warmogs is very good on him as well, and then you can also go Banner of Command if you want to. So he can get, you know, most of the tanky items and be pretty good. And I have a guide on him, so if you want to watch it, obviously it's a Season 7 guide, but the playstyle hasn't really changed on him a lot, just some of the itemization. But that's really good to learn how to play Tahm Kench if you want, so be sure to check that out. Yeah, I think he's definitely getting stronger. Blitzcrank he's good. The problem with Blitz is people are playing more tanks now. So he's not amazing into Thresh, Leona, especially Alistar. He hates Alistar. Alistar is like a hard counter to Blitz, because Alistar can just step up and deliberately take a hook later in the game and then hard engage on your team. So he takes the hook, ults, and then like Qs, knocks you up, and then knocks you back into the team and you die. So it's actively like really bad to hook Alistar later in the game, because it's like basically bringing a Trojan horse into your team that's just going to like blow up and destroy your team. So you don't want to do that. He doesn't have a great matchup against Taric either. Taric can, similar to Alistar, like stun a bunch of people and just like cast his ult and just start a tough team fight. So you're basically giving Taric a free flash into your team if you do that. Same thing with Leona to some extent, and Thresh. Like you do not want to pull these champions into your team. Rakan, if you can kill the Rakan early enough, you can get him. But anyways, he doesn't have great matchups into those. I mean, Blitzcrank is very good in a meta that's dominated by squishy champions. So when Sona, Janna, you know, Nami, that kind of stuff, when that's really popular, then Blitz is going to be at his best. So he's decent right now. There are enough squishies, especially in other roles. You can roam really well. Most people that are mid lane and jungle are going to be squishy, so you'll still have some good hook targets. But he's very one-dimensional. You either hit your hook or not. Versus someone like Thresh who, you know, can make plays with his hook, but he has other stuff he can do as well. Or Alistar, who can peel very well. Blitz doesn't peel that well. So he's all right. He can be powerful. You know, if you're against something like a Misfortune bot lane, or you're against a Zyra bot lane, then he can be very good, especially against Misfortune. He will spank Misfortune. Because she has virtually no way to escape. I mean, she does have some extra movement speed on her W. So she can dodge your hooks in theory. But, yeah, so he could be good in a Misfortune. But, you know, he doesn't have as many good matchups as he used to. So he's still very good. If you're good with him, you can definitely take over a game. But he's just not quite as good as he was before the end of last season, because all the Ardent users people just aren't picking him as much. He's good into Sona, so if people still pick Sona, he's good. Good against Janna. So he has his spots. He's just not as universally, like, I wouldn't blind pick him as early as these. He also has, like, Morgana's very good against him, and Tahm is good against him. There's just a lot of stuff that people are playing these days that are good against him. Morg should maybe be a little bit higher up here. We'll talk about Morgan a little bit. I'll go ahead and move her up some. I don't think her rework this patch is going to matter that much. Yeah, I might play Morg before I would play Lulu right now. And I'll move Brand down a little bit. I tried Brand. He feels kind of bad in a lot of matchups. There we go. Because Morgana does have pretty favorable matchups into Thresh, Leona, Rakan, Alistar. So we'll talk about Morg here in a second, but that's pretty good. Okay, Misfortune. So what's up with Misfortune? Misfortune is the new hotness. Not new, but she's kind of resurrected. A lot of people forgot about her. She was used in Season 6 in the World Finals. I think that Gorilla popularized her. I'm trying to remember. I think it was Gorilla from Rocks Tigers. So let's take a look at Misfortune here really quick. So I get asked about her a lot, and I do think that she is very good right now. I think there are several things that have influenced that. So now she's obviously a very good AD carry, but even as support, I think she's pretty good. And historically, I haven't recommended her as support that much because when she was first kind of brought onto the scene, she was a very specific counterpick to Zyra, and she was only good with like very specific AD carries, mostly Ashe, because it allowed people to hit the Ashe arrow very easily. So her poke was kind of annoying, and she could get Black Cleaver later and be okay. So she was all right, but now her poke is just like next level because of Comet. There are several things that are going on with her. So Comet, it's basically a guaranteed hit when you put your E on them because they're slowed. And then Scorch, it's a guaranteed Scorch every 20 seconds. And then also you can run Cheap Shot. And if you auto attack them, then it's going to do a ton of extra damage. So she can use all three of those early game runes, Scorch, Cheap Shot, and Comet, very, very well to abuse people. And she can get Mana Flow Ban. So one of the problems early on with her Harass is that it's very mana intensive, and she has pretty low mana regen, and you can't really buy a lot of mana regen items with her. You can get Frostfang, which is great. But you can't get a lot of other mana regen items. Now, another thing with Comet is every time you damage somebody with area of effect, then it gets lowered by 10%. Now, it only procs every, 0.5 seconds or so, but if you put your E right on top of somebody, they're going to be stuck in it for at least a second probably. So you're going to get 2 procs of this. So she's going to get 20% cooldown off on the Comet, at least, if not more. So that's the issue, is that she's just a Comet machine, pretty much. Like, oh, it's per enemy hit. I didn't even realize that. So if you hit both people with your area of effect, okay. So, you could get up to 40% off if 2 people stay in it for the duration. Wow. Okay, and this has good scaling with AD as well. So that's very important to know. You get plus 35% bonus AD on this bad boy. So, yeah, the interaction between all of those is very good. So now, basically, she doesn't run out of mana as easily because of Mana Flow Band. She procs Comet, she procs Scorch, and she procs Cheap Shot very well. And her Q does really heavy damage too. And it allows a lot of these very popular Comet AD carries to land very easy hits. So if you press your E on somebody with Varus, for example, he's going to have a free arrow hit pretty much because they're not going to be able to dodge because they're stuck in this E. So, especially if you're on comms with the AD carry, Varus can start charging an arrow. You walk up, put an E on him, and then he gets a free arrow hit unless they flash most of the time. Or if they have a dash, like they're an Ezreal or something. So that's really abusive. And then Jen gets a free W hit on him. Most of the time if you E him, Ashe gets a free arrow on him. So she just has a lot of really good interactions. Now, her scaling is not the best. It's okay. You're primarily picking her just to completely dumpster your lane. And now that Sona's out of there, Sona's not going to be able to heal through it as easily, and she's not going to be able to counteract your poke. So, you know, you can really, really crush your lane early on. And of course, because she's an AD champion, she's going to take towers pretty quickly as well. And she has excellent wave clear with her E as well. So it not only slows people and holds them in place, but it also clears the wave really quickly. Now, once you get Cleaver, you also have that utility where you get to shred the armor on the entire enemy team, and you get to stay very far back in a team fight. And it does a lot of damage. And if you look at her ultimate, level 1 minimum damage, if they sit in your full ult, is 900. If they sit in it for 3 seconds. 900 damage. 9. What? Oh, it's percent. Okay, sorry. 900% of your AD. That's pretty close to 900 damage, though. Like, you know, when you hit level 6, you're going to have pretty close to 100 AD. Maybe not quite 100, but if you have a couple of long swords or something, you're getting close. That's 900% of your AD. Wow. Yeah, that's a lot of damage, and it's only on 120-second cooldown. So she's very, very good in team fights. You can also get Ghost Blade with that, and that helps you rotate really quickly. It helps you ward, helps you run back to lane. That's another thing, is she's very fast. So with Strut, you know, you get a lot of extra bonus movement speed as well. So it helps you run to lane, helps you ward, helps you rotate. So that's very powerful. Now, she can get murdered by assassins, okay? So if they have a fed Rengar, a fed Akali, anything like that, she's dead. So that's the problem, is that she has very few ways to escape things that do a lot of damage that have gap closers. And she's not going to be 1v1ing a lot of people later on in the game. But, you know, she's very oppressive in lane, probably the most oppressive support to go against in lane right now. Just extreme amount of poke, excellent with Varus and Jhin, who are really popular right now in poke lanes. Very, very good team fighting, pretty good team utility, and just a ton of damage if you can't get to her on that back line. So, yeah, I mean, she's really, really good. So, you know, I don't want to put her in tier 1 because, you know, if she gets engaged on, she has a really hard time against Leona. Like, if Leona engages on her, she's dead. Rakan engages on her, she's dead. Thresh is a little harder to hit her because she can stay so far back. That's another thing, is her Make It Rain has a 1,000 range, which outranges Zyra. So that's part of why she's a really hard counter to Zyra. Now your Q also is going to kill plants in one hit. And she's pretty good against like Xerath, Lux, you know, these other kind of cute poke champions, because this is guaranteed. You can't miss this. You just press E on them at 1,000 range, and it's just going to do a ton of damage. So she's very dependable, like just insane poke in lane. So she's a lot of fun to play too, because she is so oppressive in lane. So very, very good. It's possible she should be much higher in tier 2, maybe even tier 1. Probably tier 1 in professional play because the laning phase matters so much. But like I said, if there's a fed assassin on the enemy team, it can be a problem. But, you know, definitely consider trying her if, you know, you practice her a little bit, if you're pretty decent at positioning in mid-game team fights, and if your team has a Jen or a Varus or something like that, or an Ashe. It's a decent choice. How are we looking on time? Pretty late. Yeah. Whatever. People are used to 90-minute videos for these. I just wanted to go in depth about a lot of them. Okay. Zyra got bumped down a lot. She was tier 1. She's much lower. I don't necessarily think that the changes to her per se are a massive nerf. They're okay. She did get a buff to the damage on her E. It's not in the patch notes, but a Rioter confirmed that did happen. So now she does 240 damage on her E. So that's nice, but, you know, it's more that I just feel like the meta is kind of moving against her a little bit. Miss Fortune especially just dumpsters her, and she's getting pretty popular. Leona is very good into her. It's really hard to poke champions like Leona and Thresh out for the reasons I described, because of second wind and the ability to get early reju beads. So you can definitely play, you can definitely dominate with her early. I just feel like the itemization is still not great for her, and it's just harder to poke people out early on. You know, if the AD carry gets a Doran shield and the support has a second wind, it's going to be a bit tougher. So she is still really good with champions like Varus, like Misfortune, you know, champions that have heavy poke or kill threat at level 6. She's still very good, so you can still win a lot of games with her. I just dropped her down just a little bit because I feel like the meta is just shifting against her a bit. Especially people aren't team fighting as much. It's just a lot of skirmishing, like running around, picking people off. And that's really not what she wants. She wants nice, clean team fights. And people aren't playing a lot of engaged champions. And that's when she's best, is when they jump into your team and you get to counter their engage with your plants and you're all in. So it's just a bunch of skirmishers that can't really, you know, that don't really want a team fight most of the time. Or poke champions, that's another thing. She hates poke champions. So not only Misfortune, but she has a really hard time against Xerath, Varus, Ashe, Ezreal, just anything that pokes. And poke is so powerful right now that she really doesn't want that. She wants the closer range stuff. So she's still all right. Okay, we'll go through these a bit faster here. I've talked about Soraka before. She's still okay. She has good heal in lane. I think the nerf to Sona helps her out quite a bit because now she's, you know, the premier early game champion. Don't forget they nerfed Sona's heal in lane a lot too. They hot nerfed her recently. So Sona's just gotten beaten down. We'll talk about her in a second, but Sona's just been like just beaten up in the back alley the last couple of patches. Riot's just had enough. They do not want people picking that champion. So Soraka's okay. Still has the same strengths and weaknesses that she always has. The change to Revitalize does help her if for some reason you want to go that as your secondary. You know, you can go something like Revitalize Conditioning. But I would still go the Ingenious Hunter if you can. So I'd probably still go for like Airy Ingenious Hunter on her. She gives you a free pass in laning. She has decent poke herself. She can heal through enemy poke decently. So, you know, if you're against something like a Misfortune or a Varus or, you know, something like that, you can potentially heal through that poke. Although I will say there's a lot of poke out there right now, so, you know, it is a bit tougher to try to deal with that. But, and her heal is just not nearly as strong early game as it used to be, so she's okay. She's okay. But, you know, the recent nerf to Airy is not great on her. And of course, the nerf to Ardent Sensor wasn't that great. And she can just get murdered and, you know, destroyed by assassins in the mid to late game. So she's okay, but, you know, as I've said in the past, Soraka's best in a meta that's dominated by tanks because then her heals are even more effective. So when you're healing somebody that has 200 armor, that's a lot better than healing somebody that has 70 armor because it's going to take them a ton more damage to cut through that health you just gave them if they have more armor or magic resist or whatever. So, you know, now that we're kind of moving towards poke and assassins, it's not as helpful. She's decent against poke, right? So she, especially later in the game, you get a couple of plus healing, shielding items. She's pretty decent against poke, but early in lane, it's rough. And then she has bad matchups against assassins. She has a really bad matchup against Leona. Thresh is not great. Rakan's not great. Taric can... Taric's all right. Like, you can outscale Taric potentially in a team fight, but like a lot of these hard engaged supports are pretty bad news bears for her. She's better at just like outscaling other enchanters. Like that's primarily where you want to pick her. Like they pick a Karma, they pick a Lulu, you know, they pick a Janna. You just pick Soraka to, you know, try to just outscale them later. Karma's another one people ask me about all the time. I'm not a believer in... I think that Karma has good pick or good poke early. People always point out that you get 15% cooldown with Ultimate Hat really early, which is nice. I just feel like the nerfs to her E were just too brutal back in the day. It just doesn't have the same kind. I think it was... Yeah, the base is so low on her updated shield, and it only gives 30% instead of 50% of the total. She doesn't have very reliable hard crowd control. She does have a lot of nice poke in lane. She is kind of fast. I just feel like enchanters a lot of them are not in great spots right now after the nerf to Ardent Censor. Yeah, I just feel like that's just not the same kind of game that it used to be. It doesn't give you enough resistances. If you go for that build, you can just get blown up because there's so much damage in the game. If you try to go for something like an Ardent Censor Redemption build, you're just going to get massacred by anything right now because there's so much damage out there. Like Leona will butcher you. If Thresh lands a hook, you're in big trouble. Rakan can hard engage. Like, I just feel like, here's my thing. If I want to be oppressive in lane and just completely crush the laning phase, I'm just going to play Misfortune probably. And Misfortune, I feel like, at least in the mid game off of one item, is going to be a lot more relevant in team fights than Karma is going to be. Because that ultimate just does so much damage, you know, between levels like 6 to 11. It's going to do so much damage. Now, Karma is going to outscale Misfortune probably in like the really late game as support after she gets, you know, 3 items. After she gets like her Athene's Redemption and Ardent Censor. But I just don't think it's that great. Also, people are moving away from the Ardent Censor users. So people are moving more towards Varus, Jhin, Misfortune, and away from, you know, like the Twitch, Callista type of people that want Ardent Censor. So that's another thing. You know, yeah, you can use Ardent Censor with Misfortune and Jhin, but they really don't want to sit there and auto-attack that much. They really just want to use their abilities. And it gives you no benefit to the abilities. So she's okay. I just don't think the itemization is great for her right now. I don't think that the meta is in a great spot for her. She is kind of a good hybrid where you can early game harass and then transition into a decent team fighter later on. So I would just rather, I don't know. I think that she is a decent compromise between different styles of play, but I would probably rather just play Janna if I wanted to go full out like late game team fighting. Janna's just a lot safer. Has much higher scaling on her shield and her ult. Or if you want to go for early game aggression, I would just play Misfortune. It's kind of the early lane game bully. Or early lane bully. But she's alright. If you like Karma, this is definitely a good time for her. Sona was a major nemesis of Karma. And now that Sona's been nerfed a lot, that does open up a space for Karma to be more relevant. And that's reflected in the rankings. I moved her up quite a lot. I was not quite ready to put her in Tier 1 and Tier 2. I know a lot of other Tier lists probably will, but I just think she has too many bad matchups right now. It just doesn't scale as hard as Janna, who I think is her main rival right now in terms of late game. She can obviously smoke Janna early, but is it going to be, like, enough? You know, is it going to be enough to hold Janna back? Maybe. But let's talk about Sona here real quick. So Sona got absolutely butchered this last patch and a half. So if you look at, I closed the patch notes. Well, I've got them here. Let's see. I closed my Google Doc with the patch notes on them. It's 15 extra mana. That's 33% more mana on her Q early game. The aura damage is 50% less. This is not only damage that you do, this is damage that your entire team does. Right? So if you if you're AD carry and you attack somebody in lane with this, you're losing 20 damage early on. You're losing 50% of your damage. Late game, instead of everybody getting 60, they're only getting 30. So every time you press this against a Baron, for example, you would get 300 damage late game. Now you're only going to get 150. Very big deal, especially on something that's only, you know, like a 3-second cooldown late game. Yeah, it has extra ability power, whatever. I mean, who cares? You know, you're going to need to have 300 ability power to make up for that. You shouldn't be getting that much ability power on Sona. And then they nerfed her really hard too, last patch and in the middle of last patch. So she's gotten like 3 nerfs over the last 2 patches. They're just really tired of seeing this champion in solo queue. So yeah, so she got those nerfs. Yeah, and then she got these nerfs, so her armor got lowered, her base attack got lowered by 4, which is pretty significant. Then the base heal and the shield strength all got nerfed a lot. And then in 722, okay, her base armor got increased. Okay, so they didn't nerf her at the beginning of 722, but they nerfed her after. So she's had 2 nerfs. But they are very, very significant. They nerfed, like, her primary abilities, you know, her W and her Q on several fronts. So yeah, I think it's really rough. They also nerfed Aerie. That was very good on her early game. Comet's just really bad. You don't want to use Comet on her. So like you can still play her, but I would play her at your own peril. I think that, I mean, she already has a really, really bad matchup into Leona. Her matchup into Thresh is not amazing. It's okay. She is very good against Janna, but she's all right against Taric. But I think she's still very squishy. And now she just is going to have a hard time doing enough damage early game. So she can still be relevant. She can still punish. You know, if they pick Janna, you can still pick her and do some damage early. Or if they pick Karma, you can still pick her and do pretty well. But it's undeniable. That was a massive, massive nerf. So I think you're probably going to have to get tier on her. You could maybe do it without tier, you know, and I had someone in chat when I was talking about this yesterday saying, you know, something to the effect of, well, just don't spam your spells. You know, in lane, you won't run out of mana. That's the whole reason you play Sona, though, is to apply a lot of pressure early game. Like, you want to be using that Q on cooldown every single time because it's your main harass. And that's why you pick her early. And it's dangerous to harass like that because she has to walk up an auto for 550. And, you know, it doesn't sound like that's too hard, but when you're walking up into engage range, like fillet range of Thresh and like E range of Leona, that's can be a pretty dangerous proposition, like root range of Zyra. You know, it's not free to have to walk up to auto. I'll tell you that, because I've had a really hard time. I mean, I know I am the minority here, but, you know, in Season 7, I had a really nice win rate with Sona, you know, 54% after 181 games. This preseason, I just cannot win with that champion, even when she was really overpowered, which is weird. But a lot of it's because she's so dangerous in the preseason. So I've gone like 2-9 or something on her, something just abysmal. And I've died almost 6 times, which is rare. You know, I died, what, like 3 times? Yeah, like 3.5 times last season. In Season 6, I think I did all right with her too. I don't think I played her a ton. Come on. But I did okay. So it's very uncharacteristic of me. And I consider myself a pretty thoughtful, you know, cautious player for the most part. Like, I don't think I give away a lot of stupid kills or stupid deaths. I mean, sometimes I do, obviously. Everybody does. But I deliberately try to... I would say I'm on the conservative side for a player. So, you know, I can be aggressive, but I'd say that if you had to describe me as, is the strategy professor an aggressive player or like a more conservative player? Is he too aggressive or too conservative? I would say people, if you had to pick one of those, would probably say that I'm too conservative. So I'm not, in other words, I'm not a super like dangerous player, and I still died a lot with her. You know, I almost doubled my deaths. Not quite doubled, but I went from like 3.5 to like almost 6 on her. So she's very dangerous in the preseason because there are a lot of things that can kill her. Like, I had a Jhin level 2 one time, like almost literally 100-0 me. Like, he auto-attacked me, hit me with a W, hit me with his 4th shot, and then threw a dancing grenade at me, and I was dead. Basically. So she can get blown up and killed. So I think the nerf is over the top. You know, I think that one of these might have been okay, like either nerf. I think maybe nerfing her on hit to 15 instead of 20 might have been okay. But this right here is just too brutal, especially both of them together. So if you really like her, you can still play her, but I think you're going to have to go tier the goddess, and you're going to... It's going to be brutal. You're going to lose a lot of your early game and just kind of hope for late game scaling. And if that's the case, you should just play Janna. Janna's just a lot safer and is going to have similar scaling late game. Okay, Morgana's another person I get asked about a lot, and she just did get changed on this patch. As you can tell, I moved her up a little bit, but I still think she has a lot of problems. Like, she is a good counter pick to Thresh and Leona. I would probably still rather pick Tahm Kenshin of those champions, but she can counter them. The problem with Morgana is that her cooldowns are really long and her W is basically worthless. Like, it's just not even a skill. It does some damage. It can, you know, wave clear, but most of the time it's just only going to proc like Frostfang or something, you know. It's just not really going to do anything. So she basically has a dead ability. Her Q is on a really long cooldown. I guess it's not like super long, but like 11 seconds is pretty long. Her shield is on an obnoxiously long cooldown. And her ult it's good, but it's, you know, it's kind of situational. So she's okay. She's okay. I just feel like you can outplay her a lot. Like Mikhail's just ruins her. If you just, anyone who can get rid of this Dark Binding, like either a Tahm Kench that can eat the person or Mikhail's, is problematic. So, and if you jump on her, you can definitely kill her. I mean, once she gets Hourglass, if she ults and has her Hourglass, it can be a longer process, but she's still really dangerous, and she doesn't have a lot of good answer to poke. She can just get murdered out, and now you don't have free sustain in lane. You have to be able to, you know, if you hit your Q and then ult them, then you will get some sustain. Now, it is important to note that this is not spell vamp, so it doesn't get 33% for area of effect. So, like in a team fight, if you ult 5 people, you're gonna be healing for a massive amount. She just doesn't have enough sustained threat. I don't know. Like she's okay. Like as a counter pick to Thresh, to Leona, to these hard engaged champions. If you also want to have some engage yourself with Dark Binding, so that's what separates her from Tahm Kench. Is her itemization? I would argue is worse than Tahm Kench is. She doesn't have as much utility as Kench, but she is good at what she does. She does protect people from magic users. And she does have a really nice 3-second bind where if you hit somebody late game, they're almost certainly dead. So she has that. But she's just a lot squishier. She's susceptible to poke. She has a dead ability that doesn't do anything, typically. So she's all right. She's just got a really rusty, like old Season 1 vibe to her. Just like long abilities that are fairly one-dimensional. And she just doesn't have a lot of sustained threat. So I don't think she's going to be that great in the mid lane either. They're trying to market her as a mid laner. I know Scar was talking about trying her in the jungle. I'm skeptical. But she's okay. She's okay. Especially now that Sona got nerfed out. She's not going to get poked as hard in lane. And she does, you know, the primary reason I've got her in tier 3 this high is because she has favorable matchups against Thresh and Leona. But she still has a lot of her old problems. Lulu, pretty good. It does help that Sona got nerfed. This is going to let Lulu do more harass and poke in lane. You know, the Aerie nerf definitely hurts Lulu. Itemization's not great on her for the same reason I described with Karma. And that, like, Ardent Censer got nerfed a lot. People aren't playing Ardent Censer champions as much. And Redemption and Ardent Censer, if you buy those two, they're good, but they're going to make you extremely squishy early game. And you lost the ability to take HP. And this goes for Soraka, Karma, Sona, all of these champions. Basically lost 72 health because you can't take flat health yellows anymore. So that makes you very, very squishy. Very squishy. Early game. So that's problematic. Also, Lulu is very heavily dependent on CDR because her W is like her whole kit pretty much. She has to have polymorph. Also, Whimsy is really good on her. So if we pull up Lulu, like one of the reasons that Lulu is good, she does have polymorph, which is very good against assassins for that 2.25 second crowd control. So that's obviously really good. She does a lot of damage in lane. She has a nice poke. But one of the big boons to her is she gives the extra, you know, up to 45% attack speed, and she gives 30% move speed. So Lulu is best paired with something like a Twitch or a Kog'Maw, someone who has wants a ton of attack speed, who goes like an on-hit build. And then Pix also does quite a bit of damage on hit. So, you know, ideally, you just want to set up the cannon. Right, you want to put your Whimsy and your Pix on your Kog'Maw, ult him, and then just watch him go to town and massacre everybody. And for that, you need a really good tank line most of the time. So you need a Sejuani or a Maokai or something like that in front to buy time for the Twitch or the Kog'Maw to kill everybody. And people aren't playing the tanks as much. People aren't playing the auto attack champions. They're playing the Varus, Jhin, Miss Fortune, and she's just not good with those type of champions because they just don't benefit as much from the attack speed. So yes, she is pretty good against assassins with her ultimate, with Whimsy, but a big part of why you pick her, a big part of her kit is her interaction with on-hit attack speed centric AD carries, and that's just not happening right now. Now, she does have some very specific matchups that are good. So anything that wants to be invisible, she's really good if she does help picks. So if you're against a Kali, for example, and you hit them with the E, then you're going to see her when she tries to go into her Shroud, which is really, really powerful. Or Twitch, or Vayne. Like, it's pretty good into Vayne, because if Vayne tries to roll around and go invisible, you can see her with this. So she is very good at spotting invisible champions with her E. And Vayne has to get really close too, so you can afford to Whimsy the Vayne. Now if Vayne buys Quicksilver Sash, that's bad. But before she does that, Whimsy's very good against Vayne. And you can pressure Vayne early with your E plus Q, a heavy poke with Scorch and Cheap Shot. You know, obviously your Q is going to slow people, and you can get an auto attack in there for Cheap Shot. So you can build her kind of like Miss Fortune, where you have the Comet Cheap Shot Scorch, or you can do Airy Cheap Shot Scorch for a lot of early game harassment. So she could be a decent pick into something, specifically Vayne, because Vayne is very close range, is not going to punish you for walking that close as hard as a lot of champions will, because she just doesn't do a lot of damage in lane. So she's a good Vayne abuser. So yeah, if I were going to pick her, I would say, have someone on your team who wants to auto attack a lot. Most notably either Kog'Maw or Twitch, and then be against something like a Vayne, and that would be a really good chance to pick her up if you really like her. Nami is somebody else. I get asked about Nami a lot. I know we have several people that love Nami on the channel. The nerf to Sona does help, but Nami's not amazing right now for a couple reasons. Her itemization is pretty weak overall. Just like other enchanters, it's just not really a Redemption Ardent Censer kind of meta on most champions, except for Rakan. And, like, in theory, she's very good with Vayne, who's popular right now, but you just can't harass through Second Wind in lane as much. Second Wind reju B to the tanks. She's very, very susceptible to getting engaged on by something like a Leona or a Thresh or a Rakan. If they ult on top of you, you're just dead. She's pretty good with Jhin too, because you can chain CC. If you hit a bubble, he hits a W and then you kill him a lot of the time. So she has that going for her. It's just an issue of it's hard to harass people enough right now through Second Wind, through Door and Shield, through Fleet Footwork. Jhin and Caitlyn might start running Fleet Footwork. And of course, she's very skill shot reliant. You have to hit the bubbles. So you definitely can win with her, and I do enjoy playing her, and I like her a lot. It's just, she's really best in a meta that's defined. She does have early game poke, but it's just like, it's not enough, though. She's just kind of in this weird limbo where she's very aggressive early, but just not quite enough. And she's very susceptible to all-in damage, so it's just kind of tough. Like, she needs a little love. She needs some love from somewhere. She needs a little bit of a buff. But the nerf to Sona definitely does open up a space for her. You can land bubbles in theory against things like Miss Fortune, Varus, Jhin, because they don't have great mobility. I'm just a little worried about her scaling. I feel like there are just other champions that just offer better things right now. So we'll see. I mean, she's okay. She's kind of a good combination of, like, pretty nice hard crowd control, good early game, but it's going to get outscaled late game. Okay, Bard just did get some buffs, which is really nice. People ask me about Bard all the time too. But they didn't really address Bard's core problem in solo queue, I think, which is that he's very low range on a champion that really wants to auto attack a lot. And he doesn't have any scaling on his E or his ult. So that's kind of the issue, is that he only has scaling on one ability, which is Cosmic Binding, and there aren't a lot of items right now that are good on non-scaling champions. So, and what I mean by that is earlier in the season, Redemption and Locket were so powerful that you would just buy them on everybody all the time. And because they don't require any AP ratios, they were just naturally super powerful items that didn't care what your scaling was on abilities. That's when he was actually like at his most viable, because everybody just bought Redemption Locket, and so it didn't matter that he has no AP ratio on his E or his R, because AP ratios didn't matter because everybody bought Redemption Locket anyways. No one was getting AP. Well, now it kind of matters, because a lot of the scaling, especially on people who have the health and armor scaling that works so well with things like Aftershock, are gonna just outscale him. And then like the enchanters who have a lot of plus healing and shielding, because people are stacking, or can in theory stack something like Redemption, Ardent Sensor, Mikhail's, are just gonna outscale you. Whereas before they couldn't stack the plus healing because everybody had to get Redemption and Locket in early 2017. So that's a core problem with Bard, is that his scaling is very low in terms of not having a ratio on his R and his E. Yes, if you get more meeps, that is a decent way to scale. And they did address that earlier in the season. They gave him several buffs where the meeps are a lot more potent than they used to be. And that's good. And they did just buff him here to where those meeps do, 10 more damage. So he does a lot more potential poke damage here. But what I want to see Bard get at least 525 range. Or maybe even 550. I'd love to see Bard with 550 range. Because right now, he needs to get those autos, but it's just too dangerous to just walk up to a Leona to try to auto attack. He has a terrible matchup into Leona. If Thresh hooks him, it's really bad. Zyra can blow him up. It's a really dangerous time to walk up into 500 range to try to auto a lot of champions. So if Leona gets nerfed, if Aftershock gets nerfed a lot, he can definitely step up and be powerful. He's very good with Comet and Cheap Shot and Scorch, because he slows people after he gets 5 meeps, which you get you get 2 meeps right off the bat early in the game, so it's not hard to get to 5. So the slow does help you apply Cheap Shot, and it makes sure that Comet is actually going to hit. So if they nerf Aftershock and they leave Comet the same, he's going to be potentially pretty good. I would like to see just some more utility with his meeps too. Really go all out. So do something. If the scaling is going to be based on his meeps, I want to see once you get a certain amount of meeps, it reduces the cooldown on Magical Journey, or maybe even allies go through Magical Journey faster when he gets so many meeps, or something like that, or it reduces the cooldown on his Tempered Fate once he gets so many meeps, or maybe they are in stasis for longer. Maybe they're in stasis for 3 seconds once he gets 75 meeps or something like that. I just want to see some more interaction between meeps and his abilities. If this is going to be his cool identity, which I like. I think that's a really cool identity, that he has to roam and collect these things and sort of have that risk reward of leaving your AD carry alone, but also getting some really nice benefits from getting the meeps, and also using that opportunity to go maybe gank middle or get really good vision. I like his dynamic. I like his design. He's a really sweet champion. It's just, he's not quite there yet for the masses. He can be good for specialists who play him, but I really just want to see more scaling. Or I want to see these abilities just have a bit more utility to them. So maybe if your team goes through a Magical Journey, maybe they get a bonus something, right? Maybe they get a bonus 5 to 10% damage based on how many points you have in it. Or maybe they get bonus attack speed. Or maybe they get to keep this bonus movement speed after they finish. So maybe after they come through Magical Journey, maybe they keep that bonus movement speed for 3 seconds. So then you can go through a wall and use it as an engage tool to really have your team run out of this thing and then just charge into people. That'd be really sweet, I think. I don't think that'd be too overpowered. That'd still be very situational, where you want people to go through the wall. But that would lead to some really cool things. If people are around a tower, he could throw this Magical Journey through the tower, and then everybody just piles in through it, and they all get, whatever, 30% movement speed, and they just run at the enemy. I think that would be a really cool interaction, or they just pop over this wall and just run at them. Maybe the numbers are too high for that. Maybe it wouldn't be 30% for 3 seconds. Maybe you could lower this to, make it 20% for 3 seconds. But just something. And that would give him, a little mini talisman out of this ability. That would be some really cool utility. Or maybe if they go through it, then they get healed for a certain amount. So when you're trying to run away, maybe you could set it up where they go through the Magical Journey, they get healed for, 20% of their missing health, then they can turn around and, maybe fight again or something. I don't know. I just think there's room to operate with this. Or maybe make it a two-way street where you can go one way and then go back the other way. That would help him to where he could go in, get some decent wards down, and then get back out the same way that he came in. Where you'd have this little cat and mouse game where people could just like go back and forth, you know, on the magical journey. So then you wouldn't know. Maybe you could like bait somebody and, you know, run through the magical journey one way and then run back through the other way. I just feel like there's a lot of potential here from a design perspective to make this have more utility and make it more interesting without making it too overpowered. And I think that would help a lot. Maybe you could leave Tempered Fate the same and just give this more utility. I could see stuff with Tempered Fate, you know. I guess that's... Tempered Fate's probably fine. That already has a lot of utility. That one's already a really cool ability. Like, I would just lower the cooldown on this. I would take it down to 120 at least, level 1. Or level 6, rather, the first point in it. Maybe, like, every time you hit somebody with an auto attack or a meep or something, maybe it lowers the cooldown by, like, 1 or 2 seconds. You know, give him a Karma-esque type of thing with that. But I think this is the opportunity. This is the best design opportunity to play with this, especially with the meeps. Where, because he uses this to go get the meeps, so thematically it would kind of make sense. And it is it's supposed to be magical, right? So why not give you like cool magical abilities when you go through it? Whether it's attack speed, move speed, all the other stuff I just talked about. I think that would fit thematically. That would be really fun. And just have that scale and interact in some way with the meeps. If they did something like that, that would be cool. I think eventually they'll do something like that to make him a little bit cooler. But yeah, this doesn't fix it. It just reinforces the fact that if he gets autos, they hurt a little bit more. But it doesn't fix the range issue. And they could just give him 25 or 50 range here. That would help him, but... You know, I would give him 25 range, and then... If I was doing design right now, I would probably give him 25 range, and then do something like, once he gets some number of meeps, once he gets 30 meeps, then the bonus speed persists for 3 seconds after allies leave. After they leave Magical Journey. You know, that's what I would do. I would start there and see how that goes, and I think that would be really cool. But I'm not on the design team, so as it stands, he's okay. He has good early game harassment. He has pretty good roaming. He has great utility. I just feel like that auto attack range holds him back a lot. So you can be really good if you're a good one trick with him, but he's very dangerous by nature because he has to roam and leave lane, which makes your AD carry vulnerable. Okay, so let's move on. And we'll end it pretty soon. Yeah, we're about at 2 hours, but I didn't want to go into detail about some of these champions. Vel'Koz, pretty good. Excellent poke. Decent solution to something like a Zyra. He's okay into Misfortune. Just the problem is you have to actually hit your Qs, and Misfortune is just so guaranteed. You just press E and boom, there it is, you know? So... he's okay. He does have a nice ultimate. Once again, it's Misfortune-esque. You have to channel it. It's really long range. I would probably just rather play Misfortune. But if you need an AP threat and you want to be really long range, then he's a pretty decent option. He has great itemization because he has true damage. He does a ton of damage to tanks and squishies alike. Excellent poke. So he's all right. And people ask me about Lux all the time. I prefer Vel'Koz to Lux if you want the Lux type of ability. The reason is Vel'Koz has much better mana costs. And that's one thing that distinguishes him from a lot of these other poke champions bot lane, like Xerath, like Lux, is that his mana costs are so much lower. I mean, look at this, 40 mana. Goes from 40 to 60 mana, and you get 80 to 240 damage. That's a 4-to-1 payout. 60 mana for 240 damage. And it has really nice range. And it applies a slow. So, I just feel like that is much, much better from a poke perspective if we compare that to... and I'll go ahead and talk about Lux here really quick, because people ask me about Lux all the time. I get asked about Lux like once or twice a stream. This is Lux's poke damage, if we compare this, okay? Mana cost 70. So you're paying 70 for 60 damage. Now, yes, you do get it. If you get close enough to auto attack, you do get a little bit of extra damage. Okay, yes, true. Okay, but at its core, It does have nice range, has 1,000, so that's basically the same as Vel'Koz's. And it's more likely to hit them than Vel'Koz. You can throw this like straight on him, and it's probably going to hit him. And it does apply a slow, just like Vel'Koz's, so very similar. That's why I'm comparing them. But it's 70 mana for 60 damage. And then it gets all the way up to 130 mana for 240 damage with a 0.6. Vel'Koz also has a 0.6. He also has 240 damage, but it's 60 mana instead of 130. It's 40 mana instead of 70. They have the same range. Now his has a much bigger slow, but they do have the same range. They both slow. They both have the same AP ratio. His is on a much lower cooldown at 7 seconds versus Lux's 10 seconds. So decent amount lower cooldown. And this does extra damage on hit if you auto, which is true, but Vel'Koz also applies a stack of his passive, which is going to do a lot more damage if he ends up triggering it. So that's kind of the thing. You know, they also have a catch, right? So he has Tectonic Disruption, 16-second cooldown, low mana cost. It sets up, you know, your combo. And then Lux has her Binding Light, you know, 13-second cooldown. Roots for 2 seconds, sets up your combo. So that's similar as well. Vel'Koz's E has a bigger hitbox, but it doesn't have as much range. Okay, so they're both very similar combo mages. Vel'Koz just has much lower harassment, or much lower costs on his harassment with similar damage. The E is similar. He has better wave clear because he can use his W for wave clear. Better damage to monsters because he can proc the true damage on them. So that's kind of the issue. They're very, very similar. Just for me, what it comes down to is that he's able to do true damage to cut through tanks a little bit better. And his poke is a lot better. They both have this boom, just massacre everybody ultimate if you land it. Now hers is obviously on a much lower cooldown. Hers has longer range. The 3,300 range is pretty massive. You know, he has 1550. So they can both pretty much stay out of the fights and channel this if you have good good spacing. Now hers does 300, 400, 500 damage. It's a single shot, so you don't have to channel it, which is nice. Now you have to get the kill, though, with Final Spark to get the cooldown reduction. Vel'Koz is going to do, you know, a lot more damage if he's able to channel this on everybody. And, you know, it's not hit or miss. Like with Lux, you either hit it or you miss. You know, they dodge it or not. This, you get to keep channeling it. So even if, you know, they flash out of it, you can move it and still get some damage on them at the end. You do have to channel it. Keep in mind, this can be true damage as well. Which means, you know, it's not exactly mathematically accurate, but you want to think of this as basically double damage in a lot of situations. So yeah, it says it's only, you know, at level 6, 450 damage. It's probably closer to 900 if they sit in it fully. It has 125% AP scaling on it. This has 0.75 and it's only 300 damage. So you're getting like 900 damage versus 300 damage. I mean, it depends on how much magic resist they have. That's just really rough kind of napkin math there. But true damage is extremely powerful. So she's a lot better against tanks. Or Vel'Koz a lot better against tanks, rather. And his damage potential is much, much higher in a team fight than hers is. But hers is easier to get the full amount out of because it's just one click, boom. So it's easier for them to dodge it all if they have a flash or a dash. But if they don't, it's easier for you to apply it all in one burst. So, you know, she's good. And it's a lower cooldown, obviously. And then, I mean, she has this prismatic barrier, too, which is pretty good. You get a little bit of an extra shield. So it has some good team fight potential. That's just why I picked Vel'Koz, though. He just has better damage potential in a team fight. And he has better harassment with his Q. So, that's it. But Lux, I mean, you definitely can win with Lux. The shield is nice. If you do land your Final Spark, it is really good. You know, if you play Lux a lot and you're very, very accurate with that Final Spark, you can roam with it, maybe make kills mid lane. So she's decent. You are going to be taking a lot of the kills, though, too, which is a thing. You know, especially in Bronze or Silver, people might get really mad at you for that. Whereas with this, you might take the kills, but it's, you know, because it's channeled over time, your allies still have a pretty good chance of being able to get the kills, even if you do a ton of damage. So, Vel'Koz is good. Lux is alright. I would prefer Vel'Koz to Lux. While we're at it, let's go ahead and compare it to Xerath, because I get asked about Xerath all the time, too. I know a lot of people are talking about Xerath. I have lost to Xerath in lane before, also. Now, every 12 seconds or so, you know, his basic attacks do restore some mana. Okay? So you can get up to, you know, if you auto-attack a champion... And he has 525 range, so it's not an amazing amount of range, but it's okay. He has good move speed for a mage, so this 340 move speed is actually pretty good. Very squishy. His mana regen is very low. But he does get some mana back. His Arcano Pulse goes on a 9-second cooldown. Now, his spells are very expensive for what they are, so we were just talking about Lux. This is similar to Lux. Similar damage to Lux. That's why I'm comparing all three of these, right? So, you know, 80 to 240 damage, same thing as Vel'Koz, same thing as Lux. If we look at them, let me just... I closed the Vel'Koz, but very similar damage profile. Very similar mana cost. But he has this ability to auto-attack and get some of that mana back. So you can get 60 mana back. So, yeah, it does cost 80, but really, if you do it once every 12 seconds, then it's only going to cost you 20. So that is pretty nice. And then, of course, you have Mana Flow Band now as a rune, which is super powerful. Gives you back a lot of mana over time. You have Eye of the Destruction or whatever, which is nice. I don't think it just slows, right? I don't think it stuns. This is what stuns. So you can slow people with this. Decent damage. I believe this is one of the last things you would level. I think this is just kind of your 1-point wonder. I believe. Or maybe this is your 1-point wonder. I'm not sure exactly how you level this guy up. But very long ranges on everything. You obviously level the Q first, I believe. What do you just get more damage for this? Okay, I think this is... Okay, so you would level your Q first, your W second, I believe. And then this would be the last thing that you would level. Because this gets extra damage if you hit him in the middle. 50% increased damage, yeah. Okay. That's your most damaging ability. So basically, he has really nice poke with his Q, especially if you land your... if you can hit your Mana Surge procs on people on time. You can hit minions with it too if you have to. If it's kind of dangerous to walk up and hit enemies. So that's useful. And then he's very good with Comet. If you hit him with Eye of Destruction, Comet's going to hit him automatically. Then he's very good with Scorch. And then this allows Cheap Shot as well to come into play if you want that. So that's handy. Shocking Orb, you do have a stun. So this is similar to, you know, a Lux Bind, pretty much. You know, it can stun him for up to 2 seconds if it travels a pretty good distance. If it's the full amount, which is unlikely. You can, you know, most of the time you'll probably hit him for 1.5 seconds, which is similar to a Lux Bind. It's probably going to be easier to hit than Vel'Koz's Knockup. It has a longer range than Vel'Koz's Knockup. Then his ultimate is pretty good damage from a distance. I mean, if you hit him with everything, if you're really good with him, it's up to 1,400 damage with 215% on a pretty low cooldown. Has a nice static cooldown. Okay. Okay. I don't understand like why people would not run something like Rylai's on him, maybe, just so that it slows him so it's easier to hit this. Like, not first item, but like maybe second or third item. I don't know. Anyways, he is very good. He does have a lot of poke. I would still probably prefer Vel'Koz, because this is a lot slower to do the damage. And it's a lot more likely you're going to miss unless you're like a Xerath expert. Whereas Vel'Koz just boom, just like obliterates everybody in a team fight. They're just different. He's much more all in on the poke, whereas Vel'Koz has poke and he has like really good team fight pressure. So if I had to rank these, I would probably prefer Vel'Koz and then Xerath and then Lux. most likely. But I don't know. I'll have to try Vel'Koz out a little bit, or Xerath out a little bit more. Maybe he is a little bit better than I think bot lane, if you can hit this and give him the mana back more often. I could see it. I mean, it's possible. You know, I have him in tier... down here. Maybe I'll put him up here. I'll put him in tier 3 instead of Veigar. Veigar is pretty good too. He has nice all-in burst damage. I've talked about Veigar before in the past. He can just get poked out early, but he has really nice kind of burst all-in damage. And I'm going to have to end it there. I don't want to go too far over 2 hours. I usually stop at the tier 3, and I don't talk a lot about tier 4s. I just want to talk a little bit about Lux and Xerath because they're becoming a bit more popular in this meta. So I still prefer Vel'Koz to those, and I prefer Misfortune to Vel'Koz. But if you're very good on either one of those, if you're very good on Lux or you're very good on Xerath, and you like playing them, this is the best meta for them in a very long time because of Comet. Because of Comet, Scorch, and potentially Cheap Shot all being very, very good on them. So, you know, this is definitely your time. If you like the poke AP champions, they can definitely win. So Brand, pretty good. Nice all-in. Still has mana problems early. Has a lot of problems against poke champions. I mean, Misfortune will just obliterate him in lane. Zyra's pretty good against him. And people just aren't team fighting as much. They're running around skirmishing. And he wants everyone to group up for a team fight so he can just press R and just vaporize everybody. So it's not a great meta for Brand. He's still okay. Fiddlesticks, the runes hurt him a lot. He isn't a great Comet user because he doesn't have a long-range way to like slow people to proc it or to make sure that the Comet's actually going to hit him. He's very susceptible to poke damage. Yes, he is good against assassins, but he hates poke. So he's okay. Braum is all right. I don't really like peeler tanks right now. I think he just gets massacred by poke in lane. It's not really a team fight oriented meta, which is what he wants. So he's okay. If you want to play a peeler tank, I'd rather just play Taric or Tahm Kench. They just have better matchups against the engaged tanks. He's all right. Trundle's okay, but Trundle's best used in a tank meta at breaking tanks with his R. Tanks just aren't around as much. There are some top lane. You'll still see Maokai. You still might see some Sejuanis in the jungle from time to time, but it's a lot more rare than it used to be. Sion has pretty good all-in damage. He's a lot better at, you know, like bronze and silver than he is as you go up because people just won't position well enough to dodge his, whatever, his axe move. So he's okay. He just gets butchered by poke, and I think he gets peeled really easily by champions like Thresh or like Janna. And he's just not as reliable for all-in as someone like Alistar or Leona, so he's okay. I mean, if you really like him, you can definitely win with Sion. I think I might do a coaching session for Sion soon. I've, you know, had a couple people asking about him, but he's okay. Zillion, I don't know. I always, you know, there's a couple people on the channel that just really, really love Zillion. They're like, why don't you have him higher? Why don't you have him higher? Why are you always hating on Zillion? I'm not hating. I just don't understand why I would want to pick him over other champions. So if you enjoy him, go for it. I just don't know what his niche is that really, like, why would I play him over the other ones? Like, yes, he has decent poke with his bombs, but it's not going to be as consistent or as powerful a lot of times as Misfortune. If you can consistently land those double bombs starting level 2, that is really good. So if you have a Jen or a Misfortune on your team and you double bomb them, yeah, they're dead. So, you know, if you're a Zillion Grandmaster and you hit the double bombs consistently in lane, yes, he can be good. He is pretty good against all-in champions once you get 6. So if they don't have a lot of sustained damage and Leona engages and you ult the person she engages on, yes, that's good. But if they have a lot of sustained damage, which a lot of people do these days, then that makes it a lot harder to win with him. Now, yes, you can speed people up as well. Like, he has some decent utility, but he gets murdered by poke. You know, Misfortune's just going to eat him up in lane. If he gets engaged on pre-6, he's probably dead. If Leona hits him or Thresh hits him with anything, he's probably dead. So he does have nice utility. He's just a bit vulnerable to both all-in and poke, and that's pretty much what this meta is right now. So yeah, if you're really good with him, you can work around that with skill, but you have to be able to hit those double bombs consistently and just not get hit by poke a lot. And against Misfortune, you're going to get hit. Like, she just presses E on top of you. You know? So, and there's not really an obvious, like, rune that seems super strong on him. You know, Comet's alright. If you hit the double bombs, Comet's good, but he's okay. He's alright, you know. I just feel like there are better options most of the time, but if you just really love Zillion, he's just your homie, and you just have to play him. You know, you can still win. Teemo's alright as support. They did nerf Aerie. That was the most abusive case with him. He's just going to get worn out by poke and lane and hard engage, so, you know, he's alright. Malzahar, okay. Nice hard engage. Going to get murdered by poke. Going to get murdered by all-in pre-6. Same thing with Annie, but they both have a really good post-6. Gragas. Honestly, haven't tried Gragas since the change into the preseason. He's okay. He doesn't have a lot of poke. He's a peeler tank. I mean, he does have engage with his barrel. He's just a lot less reliable, I think, than the other engage tanks. Like, I'd rather just play Thresh or Leona most of the time. He does have pretty good sustain in lane. He is relatively safe, kind of like Rakan. You know, you can, like, E over walls. Good mobility. He has pretty good base damages. I mean, the E is a nice way to counter things like Lee Sin engaging or Jarvan. I mean, he was used in Worlds last year primarily as a counter to Jarvan in the jungle. Pretty good scaling on a low cooldown with his ult. I mean, I feel like you definitely can win with Gragas. I mean, you can counter Leona. If Leona tries to engage onto your AD carry, you can just body slam her and knock her out of it. And then you would get the Aftershock, which Aftershock's very good on him, obviously. I don't know. I'll have to test. I mean, maybe Gragas should be higher as support. He's obviously going to have a hard time with poke, but a lot of these champions will. You can body slam Alistar, who's trying to headbutt forward and counter him if you're good with him. So if you're really, really good with body slam at countering stuff, if you just, like, see the future, you see it coming, and you can just stop people with that body slam, that's pretty good. So it's kind of like Flay. Not quite as much utility as Flay has, but it's close. It's kind of like a poor man's Flay that does a lot more damage. So I think you would probably max body slam. You might get 1 or 2 points in barrel and then body slam. Now, the barrel, in theory, would be a good way to proc Comet, but I think you have to take Aftershock on him. So, I don't know. I mean, I guess his body slam, like... the thing about Leona is her E can engage through a minion wave, which is really powerful. The body slam cannot. And his body slam just isn't as good as Thresh for, like, long-range engagements. And Leona's better at, like, guaranteed... not guaranteed, but, like, higher probability of hitting engagements in lane. And she does a lot more damage than he does with her Sunlight. And she's tankier. But he does have better disengage tools. And he's a little more flexible with his explosive cast and body slam. I don't know. I'd probably rather just play Thresh, Leona, or Alistar, but he's interesting. He's interesting because he is really good with Aftershock. He's good with Knight's Vow. He is safe, relatively safe when you go try to ward in the jungle because he can body slam over walls to get away from things. He can disengage and peel with his explosive cask. They did lower the cooldown on the cask a while ago. And he does use the tank items really well. You know, he would obviously love to get something like, you know, Knight's Vow Locket, Warmogs. Something like that would be an awesome combination on him. He can use Banner of Command. So he's all right. I'd have to try him out. But I feel like he's not going to be as good as the 3 that I mentioned earlier. But he could be good. He could be good. He's untested. Untested for me, but maybe he deserves to be up in tier 3. Maybe even low tier 2, depending on how good you are with that body slam. But and then the rest of these, I just wouldn't recommend. I don't have time. We're already at 2 hours. I can't go into all of them. Shin was interesting last patch, but his passive his Q got nerfed a lot. It lost a lot of damage on it. So you can still try to support Shin, but he's not going to be nearly as good as he was in 7.23. Okay, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.